Some confessions are about what someone did. Others are about the years stolen by a lie. This is David's confession about the son he spent 17 years believing had forgotten him.
My son is getting married in 3 days, and until last Wednesday night, I believed I was finally going to meet him as a father again. Not over a phone, not through a birthday card, not through money I sent across the Atlantic. Face to face. His mother called it a small wedding. My son called it his wedding, and for the first time in 17 years I had an invitation with my name on it. I bought my plane ticket that same night. I bought a new suit. I even stood in front of the mirror like an idiot, practicing what I would say when I saw him. "Congratulations, son." "No, too formal. I've missed you. Too much. I'm proud of you." That one felt right. I had no idea I would soon discover that my son had spent most of his life believing something completely different about me, that I didn't love him, that I had abandoned him, and worst of all, that I had chosen another family over him. My name is David. I'm 58 years old. I live in Texas now, although I was born and raised in England. I have been married for almost 30 years to my second wife, and we have 2 children together. But before all of that, I had a son, Matthew. He was 3 years old when his mother and I separated. I still remember the morning I left. He was sitting on the living room floor playing with a little plastic fire engine. He didn't understand why I was putting bags into the car. He asked me, "Daddy, where are you going?" I told him I was going away for a while. I told him I loved him. I promised I'd see him again. I believed that promise. I didn't know that within a few years, seeing my own son would become almost impossible. After the divorce, I moved to America. I joined the military. It wasn't because I wanted to escape Matthew. I needed work. I needed somewhere to rebuild my life. And from the beginning, I made one thing very clear to myself. Distance would never mean abandonment. So I sent money, more than I was legally required to send. I paid for clothes, school expenses, birthday presents, Christmas presents, anything I thought a little boy might need. And I wrote letters, dozens of them. Sometimes I'd send photographs of where I was stationed. Sometimes I'd tell him about ordinary things. The weather, the places I'd traveled, the stupid food I'd eaten, anything that might give him a picture of his father. I wanted him to know I didn't disappear. I was trying to stay in his life, but I wasn't there. And that distinction would eventually become the most painful thing I've ever had to live with. Because every time I called England, Matthew's mother would tell me the same thing. He's busy. He's with friends. He's not in the mood to talk. Sometimes she'd hand him the phone. I'd hear his little voice. "Hello?" I'd say, "Hi, mate. It's Dad." And there would be silence. I'd ask about school, football, his friends, anything. Sometimes he'd answer with one word. Sometimes he'd say he didn't want to talk, and eventually I stopped asking why, because his mother always had an explanation. She'd say, "He's angry. He thinks you left us. He's too young to understand." I believed her. What else was I supposed to believe? I was thousands of miles away. He was a little boy, and I was his father who had left England, so I tried harder in the ways I knew how. More money, more presents, more letters, more calls. But somewhere along the way, I made the mistake that would haunt me for the next 17 years. I started believing my son really didn't want me. And once I believed that, I stopped fighting for the one thing money could never buy: his time. After I moved to America, I made a promise to myself. Distance was never going to be an excuse. I sent child support every month, usually more than I was required to. If Karen said Matthew needed new school clothes, I sent the money. If there was a school trip, I paid for it. Birthdays, Christmas, medical expenses, whatever I could reasonably help with, I did. But money wasn't the part that mattered most to me. I wanted to hear my son's voice, so I called. At first, Karen would put him on the phone. He was only 3 or 4, so most of our conversations were barely conversations. I'd ask, "How was school?" And he'd say, "Good." I'd ask, "Did you play football?" "Yeah." Then I'd hear Karen in the background telling him to say goodbye. And the call would end. I didn't think much of it. He was little. Then the years started passing, and the calls became different. I'd ask, "Can I speak to Matthew?" Karen would say, "He's busy," or "He's out," or "He doesn't really want to talk today." Sometimes she'd hand him the phone anyway. I'd hear, "Hello?" And I'd say, "Hi, mate. It's Dad." There would be silence. I'd try to keep the conversation going. I'd ask about school, his friends, football, anything a father could ask a son from thousands of miles away. But sometimes he'd simply say, "I don't want to talk." Then he'd hand the phone back. And Karen would tell me, "Don't take it personally." I tried not to, but eventually I did, because I was hearing the same thing over and over. My son didn't want to speak to me. I began wondering what he thought I'd done. One night I asked Karen directly, "What does he think about me?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He thinks you left us." That sentence stayed with me, because from my son's perspective, I suppose that was exactly what it looked like. His father had left England, moved thousands of miles away, started a new life, and wasn't there when he came home from school. Wasn't there at football matches. Wasn't there when he was sick. I understood why a child might feel abandoned. What I didn't know was what else he had been told. I started making trips back to England whenever my military schedule allowed. I wanted to see him. I didn't want gifts or money to be the only evidence that I existed. I wanted 5 minutes with my own son. The first few times Karen told me he was busy. Then he was staying with friends. Then he had school commitments. I tried to be patient. I didn't want to force myself into Matthew's life if he genuinely didn't want me there. Then one afternoon I drove to the address Karen had given me. I had brought a small bag of presents. I stood outside the house and knocked. Nobody answered. I called Karen. She sounded surprised. Then she said, "Oh, we moved." I remember just standing there. "You moved?" "Yes." "When?" "A little while ago." I asked where they'd gone. She said she'd call me later. She didn't. I spent that evening in a hotel room with the bag of presents sitting on the chair beside me. I remember looking at one of them. It was something I'd bought because I'd imagined Matthew opening it. And for the first time, I wondered whether I was making things worse by continuing to chase a relationship my son supposedly didn't want. Still, I didn't stop trying. Years later, I came back to England again. This time I told Karen beforehand. She gave me another address. I went there. Again, I didn't see him. "He's away." That was the explanation. I asked when he'd be back. She said she didn't know. I started noticing something. Whenever I came to England, Matthew was never there. Eventually I asked Karen, "Does he actually know I'm here?" She became defensive. "Of course he does." "Then why won't he see me?" She looked at me and said, "Because he doesn't want to." I didn't argue. I couldn't. What do you say to a mother who tells you your own child doesn't want you? So I went back to America, and I made the decision that would haunt me for the next 17 years. I stopped forcing the door open. I told myself I was respecting my son's wishes. I continued sending money. I continued sending birthday and Christmas presents. I continued writing, but I stopped showing up unannounced. I stopped asking Karen to put Matthew on the phone every time I called. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a father who was fighting to get back in. I became a father who was simply waiting to be wanted. What I didn't know was that Matthew had been waiting too. By the time Matthew was 16, I had learned not to expect much from our relationship. I still loved him. That never changed. But I had stopped imagining that a birthday card or a phone call was going to suddenly repair 17 years of distance. Then I had an idea. I wanted to give him something that didn't need an explanation. Something practical. Something he could keep. A car. I wasn't buying him anything extravagant. Just a reliable used car he could learn to drive in and eventually take to university. I remember telling Karen about it. She sounded surprised, then pleased. She said Matthew would be thrilled. I transferred the money and asked her to let him choose the car. A few days later, she called me. She told me he'd found one. Black. Apparently he loved it. I asked, "Did he say anything?" She laughed and said, "He couldn't stop talking about it." I sat there after the call with the stupidest smile on my face. Because for the first time in years, I could picture my son enjoying something I'd given him. I remember thinking, maybe this is a beginning. Maybe one day he'll understand that I never stopped thinking about him. I asked Karen if I could speak to him. She paused, then said, "He's out with a friend." I said, "That's fine. Just tell him Dad said congratulations." She promised she would. I believed her. Years passed. I never thought about that car again. Until Matthew was an adult. And by then, I had convinced myself that whatever relationship we'd once had was simply gone. I didn't know that the car had never been the beginning of anything. Because Matthew had never received it. And I wouldn't discover that until much later. For years I believed my son had driven a car I'd bought him. He hadn't. The money had gone to Karen. The car never existed in Matthew's life. But there was something even more painful waiting behind that discovery. Because when Matthew eventually told me what he remembered about being 16, he didn't remember a father who had bought him a car. He remembered a father who, according to his mother, had never bothered to send him anything at all. And that's when the story I had been telling myself for 17 years started to fall apart. Because if Matthew hadn't received the car, what else had he never received? And if Karen had lied about something that simple, what had she been telling my son about me all those years? After the car, I became even more careful about how I helped Matthew. I didn't want to simply send money to Karen and hope it reached him. So when she told me Matthew had been accepted into university, I asked for the details. She gave me the university name, the course, the enrollment information, the tuition figures. I contacted the university myself. I confirmed that my son was actually enrolled. He was, so I paid the tuition directly to the university. 4 years. Every payment documented, every receipt saved. I didn't mind paying. If anything, I was proud. I remember thinking, at least this is something I can do for him. He might not want to speak to me. He might not want me around. But I could still make sure money wasn't standing between him and his future. Karen kept me updated. She'd tell me how his studies were going. She'd sometimes send photographs. I saw him growing into a man through pictures sent by his mother. And every time I asked, "Can I speak to him?" the answer was the same. He doesn't want to. I began to accept that as fact. I even told myself I had no right to keep pushing. He was an adult. If he wanted me in his life, he'd contact me. So I waited. Years went by. I built a life in America. I married again. I had children. I became a husband and a father all over again. And that created a strange guilt inside me. Because every time I looked at my younger children, I thought about Matthew. I wondered what he looked like now. What he sounded like. What kind of man he'd become. I still sent birthday messages through Karen. Still sent Christmas gifts. Still asked how he was doing. But I stopped asking to speak to him as often. I told myself I was respecting his wishes. Maybe I was. Or maybe I'd simply become too afraid of hearing him reject me again. Then when Matthew was 30, Karen called me. Her voice sounded different. She said, "Matthew's getting married." I didn't know what to say. After everything, my little boy was getting married. I asked when. She told me, I asked where. She told me. Then I asked the question I'd spent years being afraid to ask. Does Matthew know I'd like to come? She said. He knows. That was all I needed. I booked the flight. I bought a suit. I started making plans. For the first time in nearly 3 decades. I was going back to England not as a man trying to find his son, but as a father going to his son's wedding, and I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the moment everything could finally change. I was wrong. 3 days before the wedding, my phone rang. It was Matthew. And the first thing he said was, "Dad, Mom says you're not coming." Matthew's voice was quiet, not angry. That somehow made it worse. He said, "Dad, Mom says you're not coming." I thought I'd misunderstood him. "I am coming." There was a pause. Then he said, "But she said you told her you didn't want to be there." I sat down. "Matthew, I never said that." Another silence. Then he asked, "Then why haven't you replied to the invitation?" I felt my stomach tighten. "What invitation?" He didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "The wedding invitation, Dad." I looked across the room at the suitcase I'd already started packing. "Matthew, I never received one." He went completely quiet. Then I heard him breathe out. And when he spoke again, his voice had changed. "Mom told me she sent it. I didn't get anything. She said you didn't want to come. I've been planning to come since she told me the date." There was another silence. Then Matthew asked, "Why would she tell me you didn't want to come?" I didn't know. And for the first time in 17 years, my son and I were asking each other questions instead of asking, caring about each other. I said, "Matthew, can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Why did you think I didn't want to be at your wedding?" He was quiet for so long that I thought we'd been disconnected. Then he said, "Because that's what you've always wanted." I closed my eyes. "What do you mean?" He said, "You left." I didn't interrupt. "You moved to America." I let him continue. "You started another family." My throat tightened. "And every time I asked Mom about you, she said you were busy, or that you didn't want to make things complicated." I couldn't speak. Then Matthew said something that broke me. "I thought you were sending money because you felt guilty." I looked down at my hands. For years I'd been wondering why my son didn't want me, and now I was hearing what he thought of me. I said, "Matthew, I never stopped trying." He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Mom told me you stopped years ago. I stopped pushing because I thought you didn't want me. I thought you didn't want me." Neither of us spoke. There it was. The truth we'd somehow both missed for 27 years. I had been waiting for my son to want his father. My son had been waiting for his father to want him. And Karen had been standing between us the entire time. Then Matthew asked, "Dad, did you really buy me a car when I was 16? I froze. "Who told you about that?" "No one." "Then why are you asking?" "Because Mom told me you never did anything for me." I felt my chest tighten. "I sent the money." "What money?" "For your car." There was silence. Then Matthew whispered, "I've never had a car from you." I didn't know what to say, so I told him the truth. "I sent your mother the money." He didn't answer. Then he said, "Dad." His voice cracked. "I need to talk to you." "I know." "No, I mean properly." "Okay." "Not through Mom." That sentence hit me harder than anything else he'd said, because for the first time, my 30-year-old son wasn't asking his mother what his father had said. He was asking me, and I realized something. The wedding wasn't the reason Karen was frightened of me coming to England. The wedding was simply the first time she couldn't control what happened next. Because once Matthew and I finally stood in the same room, we could compare the stories ourselves. Matthew came to America a few days later. He didn't want to wait until after the wedding. He came alone. When I saw him walking toward me at the airport, I almost didn't recognize him. I knew his face from photographs. But photographs don't prepare you for seeing your child as a grown man. He was taller than me, beard, suitcase in one hand, and for a few seconds neither of us knew what to say. Then he hugged me. It wasn't a long hug. It wasn't one of those movie moments where everything suddenly disappears. It was awkward, careful, like two people who desperately wanted to trust each other but didn't know how. We went back to my house, and the first thing Matthew asked me was, "Can you show me?" "Show you what?" "Everything." I knew exactly what he meant, so I took him upstairs. There was a box in the back of my wardrobe that I hadn't opened properly in years. Inside were letters, birthday cards, photographs, old envelopes, receipts, things I'd kept because I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Matthew picked up one of the envelopes. His name was written on it. He looked at me. "Why didn't I get these?" I said. "I thought you did." He opened another, then another. There were dozens. Some had dates written on them. Christmas, birthdays, school milestones. Little notes I'd written when I was stationed overseas. Matthew kept looking at them. Then he asked, "Why did you keep them?" I said, "Because I couldn't throw away something I'd bought for my son." He looked down. Then I saw tears running down his face. He picked up a birthday card. There was a message inside. I recognized my own handwriting. I had written, "Happy 10th birthday, mate. Dad loves you and can't wait to see you again." Matthew stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "I've never seen this." Neither of us spoke. He opened another, then another. Some gifts had been returned unopened. Some letters had never reached him. Some photographs had never left England. And then Matthew found something that neither of us expected. A small stack of envelopes addressed to me. His handwriting was different. Younger, Monsieur. But I recognized his name immediately. I looked at him. "What's that?" He swallowed. "I don't know." He opened one. Inside was a child's handwriting. It said, "Dear Dad, Mom says you're busy, but I wanted to know if you're coming home." I felt my entire body go cold. I looked at Matthew. "Did you write this?" He nodded. I think I was about 8. I picked up another. Then another. There were several letters Matthew had apparently written to me, but I'd never received them. I asked, "Why didn't you send these?" He looked confused. I did. I couldn't breathe. For years, I'd believed my son had stopped trying. For years, I'd told myself, he doesn't want me. But there in my hands were letters from a little boy asking where his father was. Matthew looked at me. "I thought you ignored them." I shook my head. "I never saw them." He covered his face, and suddenly we weren't looking at a box of old letters anymore. We were looking at 17 years of evidence that both of us had been waiting for the other. Then Matthew said, "Dad." I looked at him. "Did Mom ever tell you I asked about you?" I couldn't answer, because I already knew the answer. "No." He nodded slowly. "She told me you didn't ask about me either." That was the moment I knew. Whatever had happened between us wasn't an accident. Someone had been deciding what each of us was allowed to know about the other. And before I confronted Karen, I needed to know just how far it had gone. I called Karen the next morning. I didn't tell her Matthew was sitting beside me. I wanted to hear her explanation first. She answered normally. "Hello?" I said. "We need to talk." She went quiet. Then, "About what?" "Matthew." Another silence. She knew. I asked, "Why did you tell him I didn't want to come to his wedding?" She sighed. "David, you don't understand." "No, I don't, so explain it to me." She said, "You left." I almost laughed. 27 years ago. You moved to America. I joined the military. You remarried. Yes. You had another family. Yes. And I raised Matthew. I know you did. Her voice became sharper. So don't stand there and pretend sending money made you his father. That hurt. Not because it was completely false, because part of it was true. I wasn't there. I missed birthdays, school plays, football matches, the ordinary moments a father doesn't get back. But I said, I never pretended money made me his father. Then what do you call it? Trying. She didn't answer. I continued. I called him. He didn't want to talk. You told me he didn't want to talk? He didn't. Then why did I find letters from him asking why I wasn't coming home? Silence. Real silence. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone has suddenly realized the conversation has changed. Karen finally said, Matthew was a child. He didn't understand what was happening. He understood enough to write to me. He was confused. He asked about me. I said he was confused. And you told me he didn't want me. Her voice cracked. Because he didn't. I looked at Matthew. He was sitting across from me.
He had tears in his eyes.
I asked, Then why didn't you ever show me his letters? She didn't answer. I asked again. Why? Finally, she said, Because I was protecting him. That sentence stopped me. Protecting him from what? From you. I felt something inside me break. From his father? From being disappointed again. She told me she believed I had chosen America. She believed I'd built a new life and left Matthew behind. She said every time Matthew asked about me, she had to watch him get upset. And eventually, she decided the easiest way to protect him was to stop letting him expect anything from me. I asked, Then why did you keep taking the money? She said, Because he needed it. And the gifts? He was a child. And the car? She went quiet. I knew. You never bought him the car, did you? She didn't answer. Karen. Finally. No. I closed my eyes. Where did the money go? She said. I used it for the family. What family? Ours. I stared at the floor. Then she said something that made me realize this was even bigger than I thought. You think you were the only one making sacrifices? I didn't respond. She continued. I raised him. I know. I was there every day. I know. You got to send money from America and feel like a good father. That one hurt. Because there were days when I had wondered exactly the same thing. Maybe I had used money to ease my guilt. Maybe I had convinced myself that sending more was easier than facing the possibility that my son didn't want me. Karen's voice softened. I didn't want Matthew to grow up waiting for a father who wasn't coming. I said, I was coming. She whispered, I know that now. I didn't understand. Then she said, But by the time I realized you hadn't abandoned him, she stopped. By then it was too late. I asked, Why? She didn't answer. So I said, Because if Matthew knew the truth, he'd hate you? She started crying. No. Then what? Her answer was almost a whisper. Because I was afraid he'd choose you. I couldn't speak. That was the first time Karen had said something that sounded like the truth. Not the whole truth, but enough to tell me we'd only uncovered the beginning. And then she said, There is something else you don't know about the wedding. I looked at Matthew. He had heard every word. What? Karen hesitated, then said, Matthew wasn't the one who wanted you kept away. I felt the room go cold. What are you talking about? She said. Ask him. The line went dead. I looked at my son. He looked just as confused as I was. And for the first time since this began, I wondered whether Karen had been lying to both of us for so long that even she wasn't the only person carrying the consequences anymore. I looked at Matthew. What did you tell your mother? He shook his head. I don't know what she means. I told him exactly what Karen had said. Matthew sat back. Then he rubbed his hands over his face. Dad, there is something I need to tell you. My heart started pounding. He said, A few months ago, Mom asked me if I wanted you at the wedding. I stared at him. And what did you say? He looked embarrassed. I said I didn't know. Why? Because I didn't know if you wanted to come. That sentence stopped me. I asked, why would you think I didn't want to come? He looked at me. Because every time Mom talked about you, she said you had your own family now. I said nothing. He continued, she told me you probably wouldn't want to come all the way from America just for me. I felt sick. So you thought I didn't want to come? I thought you might come out of obligation. Then he looked down, and I said something stupid. What? I told Mom. He swallowed. If Dad doesn't really want to be there, I don't want him coming just because he feels guilty. I closed my eyes. There it was. The sentence that had somehow become the foundation for everything. Matthew hadn't said, I don't want Dad at my wedding. He had said, I don't want Dad coming if he doesn't want to be there. And Karen had turned one sentence into another. I asked, what happened after that? Matthew said, she told me she'd spoken to you. And? She said you didn't want to come. I laughed. Again, that horrible laugh that comes out when something hurts too much to process. So that's it? Matthew looked at me. What do you mean? For 27 years I've been told you didn't want me. He looked at me. And I've been told you didn't want me. Neither of us spoke. Then Matthew said, Dad, why didn't you just ask me? I looked at him. I thought I was asking you. No. I asked your mother. That isn't the same thing. He was right. And that was the hardest part. I had spent years allowing someone else to speak for my son. I had accepted rejection from a person who wasn't actually rejecting me. I just hadn't realized it. Matthew stood up. I need to see Mom, I said. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He picked up his phone, then stopped. Dad. Yeah? If everything you're telling me is true. He looked at the box of letters on the table. Then what else don't I know? I didn't have an answer. Because suddenly I realized the car wasn't the only thing. The letters weren't the only thing. The university payments weren't the only thing. There were 27 years of decisions made between a father and son who had never been allowed to make those decisions together. And now we were going to find out exactly how much of our lives had been built on somebody else's version of the truth. Matthew didn't call his mother that night. Instead, he looked at me and said, Can you prove it? I knew exactly what he meant. Not because I was offended. Because after everything we'd just discovered, I understood. He needed to see it for himself. So I opened my laptop. The first thing I showed him was the university payments. 4 years. Every tuition payment, paid directly to the university. Matthew stared at the screen. Then he looked at me. I thought Mom paid for university. I shook my head. She told me you needed help. I contacted the university myself. He scrolled through the records. There were payment confirmations, dates, amounts, emails, everything. He sat back. I never knew. I know. Then he asked, Why didn't you ever tell me? I didn't have a good answer. Because I thought your mother was telling you. He looked at me. She wasn't. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Then he started searching through the box again. He found the photograph I'd sent when he was younger. Then another. Then a Christmas card. Then the receipt for the car. He stared at it. This is the car? That's the payment. He looked at the date. Then he pulled out his phone. He started typing. I asked, What are you doing? I'm checking something. A few minutes later, he looked up. Mom had the money. I didn't say anything. He had apparently found an old bank statement she'd kept. The payment was there. The same amount. The same date. Matthew looked sick. She told me you never sent it. I said, I know. He kept staring at the screen. Then he asked, Dad, how many things did she keep from me? I didn't answer, because I didn't know, and that was the frightening part. We had spent hours comparing what I'd remembered with what he'd been told, but there were still years we couldn't account for. Years of birthdays, years of phone calls, years of letters, years of decisions. Then Matthew found something I hadn't even remembered keeping. A photograph. It was from when he was about 7. I was standing outside a school building in England. I had my military uniform on, and beside me was a small birthday present. Matthew stared at the photograph. "What is this?" I smiled sadly. "I came to see you." His face changed. "You came?" "I told you I did." "No." He shook his head. "Mom told me you never came." I looked at the photograph. I was there. He sat down. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Why didn't you fight harder?" That question hurt because I knew I deserved it. I should have. He looked at me. "I thought you didn't want me. I thought you didn't want me. But you were the adult." I nodded. I was. He started crying, and I didn't try to defend myself, because Karen had lied to both of us, but I was still the father. I should have found another way. I should have kept looking. I should have tried harder to reach my son directly. Instead, I accepted the word of the person standing between us, and now I had to live with the consequences. Matthew wiped his face. Then he said, "I still want to get married." I looked at him. "Good. But I don't know what to do about Mom." I didn't answer immediately, because that wasn't my decision. Then he asked the question I had been dreading. "Dad, do you still want to come?" I looked at my son. For 27 years, I'd been afraid of the answer to that question. This time, I didn't hesitate. "I've wanted to come to your life for 27 years. He looked down, then nodded. "Then come." And somehow, those 2 words meant more to me than any invitation ever could. But there was still one thing left. Karen. Because Matthew was going to marry the woman he loved in 3 days, and his mother was going to be there. Which meant we had one final decision to make. Whether the truth would come out before the wedding, or after it. Matthew called his mother the next morning. I stayed out of the conversation. This was something he needed to do himself. About an hour later, he came back into the room. His face told me everything. "What did she say?" I asked. He sat down. "She said she was sorry." I waited. "Then she said she doesn't regret raising me." I nodded. "I don't think she should." He looked at me. "But she says you don't understand what it was like." I didn't answer, because I didn't. I hadn't been there. Karen had. She had taken Matthew to school, looked after him when he was sick, paid the bills when money was tight, sat beside him when he was frightened. She had been his parent every day. I couldn't erase that. But then Matthew said, "She also admitted she knew you were trying to contact me." I felt my jaw tighten. "What else?" "She said she stopped giving me your letters because she thought they would confuse me." "And the car?" "She admitted she kept the money." I looked away. "And the university?" "She said you were paying it anyway, so she didn't think it mattered." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because after everything I'd heard, that was the sentence that finally made me angry. It mattered. All of it mattered. The money mattered. The letters mattered. The presents mattered. The calls mattered. Not because they made me a good father, because they were attempts to remain connected to my son. Matthew looked at me. "She says she thought she was protecting me." I said, "Maybe she believed that. Do you believe her?" I thought about it. "Yes." Matthew looked surprised. "I think she convinced herself she was protecting you." "But she lied." "Yes." "She took your money." "Yes." "She kept your letters." "Yes." "She told me you didn't want me." "Yes." He looked down. "Then how can you still believe she loved me?" I answered immediately, "Because those things can both be true." He looked at me. She loved you.
She also hurt you?
And she hurt me, more than you probably realize. Matthew was quiet. Then he said, I don't know how I'm supposed to stand beside her at my wedding. I understood. His wedding was 3 days away. The woman who raised him was supposed to be there. So was the father he'd spent his life believing had abandoned him. And suddenly the wedding wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was the place where 27 years of secrets were about to collide. I told Matthew, you don't have to choose between us. He looked at me. I don't? No. Then what do I do? Get married. He laughed through his tears. I mean it, I said. You've spent enough of your life carrying other people's decisions. Don't let this become another one. He sat quietly for a moment. Then he asked, will you come? I smiled. If you still want me there? He looked directly at me. I do. And that was the first time in 27 years that I heard my son say those words without someone else standing between us. But there was still one thing I hadn't told him. I wasn't sure I could forgive Karen. Not yet. Maybe I never would. But forgiveness wasn't the decision I had to make that day. The decision was whether I was going to walk into that wedding, after 27 years of being kept outside, and finally take my place as Matthew's father. The wedding day arrived. I remember standing outside the venue with my suit on, staring at the doors. I had crossed an ocean to get there. But somehow, walking through those doors felt harder than anything I'd done in my life. For 27 years, I'd been the father standing outside. Outside the house. Outside the conversations. Outside my son's childhood. And now, I was standing outside his wedding. I almost turned around. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Matthew. Dad, where are you? I looked at the doors. Then I walked inside.
I saw Karen first.
She was standing near the entrance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked at me, then at the suit. Then she started crying. I didn't say anything. Not because I hated her, because there were too many things to say, and none of them belonged in that room. Then I saw Matthew. He was standing at the other end of the hall. Our eyes met. And suddenly I wasn't looking at a 30-year-old man. I was seeing the little boy on the living room floor with the plastic fire engine. The boy I'd left behind. The boy I'd spent 27 years trying to find again. Matthew walked toward me. He stopped a few feet away. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he said, You came. I smiled. You asked me to. He looked down. Then he said, I was scared you wouldn't. I swallowed. I was scared you wouldn't want me. He looked at me. I never stopped wanting you. That was it. That was the sentence I'd spent 27 years needing to hear. I pulled him into my arms. And this time, neither of us let go quickly. A few minutes later, Matthew looked toward the ceremony room. Then back at me, he said, Dad? Yeah? Will you come inside? I nodded. And we walked in together, not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. The wedding didn't erase 27 years. It didn't give me back the birthdays I'd missed, the school plays, the football matches, the first driving lesson, the ordinary evenings. Nothing could give those years back. But for the first time, I wasn't outside my son's life anymore. After the ceremony, Matthew found me alone. He said, I need you to know something. What? I don't know what my relationship with Mom is going to look like after this. I told him, You don't have to decide today. He nodded. Then he asked, Do you hate her? I thought about that for a long time. No. After everything, I can be angry with someone without pretending they never loved you. He looked at me. Then he said, I think that's what makes this so difficult. I nodded. It should be difficult. Because the truth is, Karen wasn't a stranger who had destroyed my family. She was the woman who had raised my son. She had loved him, protected him, sacrificed for him, and somewhere along the way, that protection became control. And control became a lie, and the lie cost all three of us years we can never recover. I eventually spoke to Karen privately. She apologized. I accepted the apology, but I didn't tell her everything was okay, because it wasn't. Trust doesn't come back because someone says sorry. It has to be rebuilt, and maybe one day it will be. Maybe it won't. I don't know. What I do know is this. For 17 years, I thought my son had rejected me. He thought I'd rejected him. And all that time, we were both wrong. The person we were waiting for was standing on the other side of a story neither of us had written. My son didn't need a perfect father. He needed to know his father had never stopped loving him. And I didn't need to recover 27 years. I only needed the courage to walk through the door when my son finally opened it. Because sometimes the greatest tragedy in a family isn't that people stop loving each other. It's that they spend years believing they aren't loved.
Some fathers lose years because they stop loving their children. Others lose years because they believe their children stopped loving them. David's story is a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous distance in a family isn't measured in miles. It's measured in things left unsaid.